Hey guys, Mike here for KickstartPoker.com, and in today's short video I'm just going to go over a hand that I played earlier today, which I thought was kind of interesting. We have Jack 9 suited in the small blind. We're playing a low stakes 6 max sit and go on PokerStars, and we have Jack 9 suited in the small blind, and the big stack under the gun just limps in for 30 chips. The button folds, and we could raise here, but I think just completing is the best play because the under the gun who limps in has a pretty big stack of 4,500 chips. He's loose aggressive as well. He has a VPIP and pre-flop raise of 44% and 30% and an aggression factor post-flop of 12. So there's not much point in raising. Jack 9 suited is actually a perfectly fine hand to see a flop with. It has a lot of post-flop potential. You want to see flops with hands like this. And it's not really strong enough to raise, especially against a loose big stack. He's going to call my raise with pretty much his entire range, and then I have to play a big pot out of position. So I'm just going to complete the small blind here, which is the best play I can make in this situation. The big blind checks behind, and we pretty much hit a jackpot flop. We flop a straight, and we also have the jack high flush draw. Now the question is, of course, are we going to bet or are we going to check? Against a passive player, betting is definitely the best play here, but against an aggressive player like we have in the under the gun position, we definitely need to check, especially because he has a big stack. In low stakes games, players often over adjust to their stack size. When they have a big stack, they find it very hard to actually find the fold button, particularly when they are loose aggressive. So the best strategy here is to just check, and I basically expect my loose aggressive big stacked opponent to bet here. So I'm just going to check with the intention of inducing a bluff or at least a bet out of my loose aggressive opponent. The big blind checks, and now Willem bets 120 chips, so he bets a little bit over the pot, which is an interesting bet. It could be a pair of tens, kings, or queens that he's trying to protect against a flush draw or straight draw. So he's, betting a little bit over the pot to try and protect his hand. But on the other hand, a loose aggressive player with a big stack can also easily do this with total air, like an ace high hand or a low pocket pair, a draw, or a weak gut shot. So there's still a ton of hands in his range that he's making this bet with. It doesn't necessarily have to be a pair, although it is quite likely on this type of board. And now the question becomes, are we going to call or raise? If we raise, I think it looks really strong because then we are check raising, and it may chase away a pair of tens or queens on this type of board. Also, if I raise, I will probably chase away the big blind. If I just call here, there's a chance that the big blind is going to call as well, or maybe shove it over the top if he has a piece of the board, or maybe a draw. So considering all this, I think calling is the best play. It can keep the big blind involved if he has something, and I can also let the big stack keep bluffing at it on the turn and river, which is often going to happen against an aggressive opponent like this. So I'm just going to call. The big blind unfortunately folds. He didn't have anything, so he's getting out of the way. Then the turn card is the deuce of hearts, which is pretty much a harmless card for me. I still have the second nuts. I'm only beaten by ace jack, but I don't think it's very likely that he has a hand like ace jack because he does have a pre-flop raise of 30%. I think he's going to raise his stronger hands, so ace jack will probably not be in his limping range pre-flop. And I also have jack in my hand, which makes it a little bit less likely that he also has a jack in his hand. So all in all, I basically have the nuts here. I don't really have to worry about any hand. Maybe a better flush draw, but it's not something I really worry about here. So the best play here is to just continue my story and check again. Would be really suspicious if I just make a bet here all of a sudden, and it's better to just check and make use of his aggressive tendencies and let him bluff once again on a turn. So that's what I do. I check, and he makes a bet of 30 chips, which is kind of an interesting bet. because why would he bet such a small amount just to make a min bet of 30 chips? Doesn't make much sense at all. On the low stakes, usually when you see this happening, when someone bets this small into a big pot, it's generally going to be a weak hand. They're unsure about their hand, but they still want to bet something to keep the initiative in the hand, and so as not to appear really weak by just checking. So I think this is most likely going to be a pair of tens or a pair of queens. In some cases a draw, but he probably bet bigger as a bluff, or check behind to get a free river card. So I think in most cases this is going to be a weak hand, like a pair of tens or queens, and it's going to be a pair of tens more often than a pair of queens, because he's probably going to be a little bit less confident about his pair of tens. So it makes sense that he makes such a small bet here on the turn. And so given his range, we're going to have to decide if we're going to call or raise now. I think we definitely have to raise here. Now is the time to get value. If he has a draw, he will only pay off a turn bet and not a river bet when he misses his draw. There's not really much point in calling this small bet. We really don't want to. We really want to increase the pot here and get some value. But on the other hand, we don't really want to raise too much. As we said, it's likely that he has a pair of tens or queens, so he has a little bit of a weak range of hands, and we don't want to chase him away. I think if we bet like 300, 350 chips here, like going close to the pot, I think we're gonna chase him away most of the time with hands like 10x. So we really want to get some value from this range, so we need to raise to a little bit more of a reasonable amount, and I think around 200 chips would be the appropriate amount here. So, and that's what we're going to do. We're raising to 200, and then he actually re-raises us. This is also quite interesting because it's kind of a small re-raise. It could be indicative of a really strong hand, maybe a hand like King 10 or Queen 10. On the other hand, he's so aggressive, it could still be a draw, or it could still be the 10x that we thought that he had when he made his small min bet on the turn. So the question now is, if, are we going to call, or are we going to raise, or are we going to shove all in? And I think that the best play here would be to just shove, because the simplest play is often the best play in low stakes games. There's not really a time to get fancy here with a call, because in that case you might not get his whole stack if his scare card hits the river. A smaller re-raise is probably a little bit too cute. Plus, it displays a lot of strength if I make a small re-raise, so he might even back away. So a shove from his perspective looks probably more like a bluff, and that I want him to fold. So I think he's going to call more often actually than when I shove, than opposed to when I make a smaller re-raise. And also I think he's probably committed here anyway, because the pot is now 916 chips. If I shove, I put in another 1284, and I think given his big stack, he's probably going to call that with just about his entire range, I guess. Even with a 10x hand, I think he's just going to call here. So shoving is really the best play against a loose, aggressive, low stakes opponent with a big stack. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to shove it in, and he actually calls. The river is an ace, which is not really great because I'm splitting against a jack-axe hand, but he actually turns over 9-10. I think this is really a badly played hand from his perspective. So yeah, our assessment of his 10x range was pretty much spot on. He overbet the pot on the flop with a pair of tens, and he was scared of the king and the queen, and the flush draw and straight draw out there, even though he had a gut shot himself. And then on a turn, he bet really small, which is kind of telling of the hand that he had, because a pair of tens in that situation was likely to bet that small. And then on the turn, when I made that re-raise, when I shoved all in, he really should have known that he was beaten, because at that point there was really no hand in my range that I'm going to shove with that that he actually beats. I'm not going to shove a draw there, so he should know really that he's beaten that spot with 2 overcards to his pair of 10s already on the board. But he pays us off, and we win a really nice pot of 3,300 chips. So yeah, this was an interesting hand. I hope you got something out of it, and good luck at the tables, guys.